evening, everybody. Welcome to the Public Facilities Arts and Culture Committee meeting on Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. All right, go ahead and take a quick roll. Myself as president, Councilmember Hager, Henderson, Hurt, Nash, Vice Chair Van Rees, Young, I detect a quorum. Now, as I mentioned last time, part of my goal as chair is to make sure that we know what all is going on in the different departments and areas of Metro that we oversee. So to that end, I asked the Fairgrounds Executive Director, Ms. Laura Womack, to kind of give us some updates and provide us some information about events, soccer, and everything going on at the fairgrounds. So with that,
yeah, hard stop is, what, an hour?
Yeah, right.
I could really, you all know, I think I could talk forever. So yes, thank you for inviting me. I really just wanted to give a high-level overview on what we're doing. In your packets, I just gave, again, a very high-level overview of the timeline. I'm taking you back to 2016 because that was the first fiscal year that we received funding. It was $15 million, where a portion of it was earmarked for general fairgrounds improvements. At the time, it wasn't clearly defined what that money was going to go for, and then a portion of that was going to go to the first part of Fair Park development. So as we move forward in 2017, we began looking at design, what that improvement money could go for. We did some aesthetic improvements, so we were looking at updating just paint and looking for ways that we could quickly improve the buildings that we had. I don't know, many of you may recall, they were pretty dilapidated at that point, so we were really looking at ways that we could do immediate aesthetic improvements while looking at maybe the possibility of constructing new facilities. Enter into soccer discussions, and that program, 2018 is when we did the final approvals for the soccer mixed use, infrastructure money. Fairgrounds was given additional funding, which helped supplement with the original funding that we have. We were able to start work on design for a new exposition facility. So throughout 2019, it was a very compressed schedule, but we were really lucky to get it done within a year. And Skanska, our construction management company, won an award for the building, and we were awarded LEED Silver certification as well. In 2020, we began construction of the MLS Stadium. That is continuing and that is ongoing. I've got some pictures later on in there for you. Today, we're still in the throes of stadium construction. We have started the infrastructure construction, which I'll go through what components that entails. And then we also were given funding for the second phase of Fair Park. And that's critical because we were able to do about 23 acres in phase one, and we have a remaining about 23 acres left. 2022 and beyond. Excuse me?
How much was that funding?
The second part of Fair Park, that was $7 million.
For a total of 46 acres all in?
The phase two funding was $7 million. The phase one total was about $8.6 million.
I appreciate that, but the total acreage of the park combined?
It's about 46 acres, yes. So in 2022, and what we're kind of looking at beyond, we do expect the MLS Stadium to be completed and open. The infrastructure project is running concurrently to that. We expect that to be done by the time the stadium opens as well. We have already started phase two of Fair Park design. And we also expect the mixed-use development to start construction. Not all of the pods or the blocks within the mixed use, but one block that everyone probably knows as Block AC. The next slide in your deck there is just to show you a little bit more information about the Fair Park process. The phase one is complete. That was the 23 acres with a 1 acre dog park. It sits at the intersection of Bransford and Craighead. Prior to Fair Park, it was an underutilized space, an important space because we used it for parking and events. However, it was underutilized in the fact that most of the time it sat vacant. The other detracting feature of the park at that point was the chain link fence and the barbed wire that really just kept everyone out. So it sat vacant and empty most of the time. We have since opened up that property to welcome people on a daily basis. We've revitalized that, put in reinforced turf. We're able to use it for sports, parking, event use, and we have used it for all of those things. There's a greenway that snakes throughout the property, crosses Browns Creek. We did a lot of work on the bridges at that point to shore them up and improve the bridges. And then we also did the reinforced turf and the hard surface parking. The phase 2 is in design. There have been some concept drawings that are out there, but what I will caution you is that phase 2 design, a lot of it was done very early on in the process. So we're having to go back and relook at it because some of the original concepts of what that could look like were done prior to the soccer discussion and prior to how the new infrastructure impacts that part of the property. So we really need to go back and take another look at that property. I will tell you that it runs along and connects phase 1 along Craighead and terminates at Nolensville Pike behind the expo buildings. We do anticipate most of that property as being riparian areas, it's mostly floodway and buffer. So we're limited about what we can do there, but there will be greenway. We're looking at sidewalks in that area. We anticipate a WeGo bus station to be on the Nolensville Pike side. So we've been working with WeGo, and then finish out the stormwater management structures that will help contain and control, I guess, Browns Creek. It fills up very, very quickly when we get heavy rains, and so we are constantly battling it exceeding its banks probably a good 3 to 4 times a year. So those structures will help with that.
What's the distance from Nolensville Pike? So, I mean, transit that's going down Nolensville Pike, when you say a station here, is that like a little substation for a smaller circulator, or is it like that's going to be, like, what's the walking distance from the existing transit line to your property?
It will be on our property. The station will be, the stop itself, we're positioning it on our property and will connect to the pedestrian routes and to the trailhead. So there'll be a great pedestrian connection from when you get to drop off at Nolensville, and you'll be able to go through Craighead and then up eventually. The idea would go to Wingrove and up to that subdivision, as well as across the street there will be another WeGo station going into town. We're the outbound, and there will be another one a little bit further up going into town.
And can you
Yes.
cross to go back into town? Where's the crossing? Like, what street is that?
It would probably be at Wingrove and Nolensville Pike. And Wingrove is the road that runs immediately adjacent to the fairgrounds.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The exposition venue itself is complete. We are just working through some final warranty items and repair items. As you can imagine, during the pandemic and as we were serving as the homeless and COVID shelter for Metro, some of the warranty work got postponed. And so that's what we're doing now, is just shoring up that last punch list and working through some last minute items. I've included some pictures for you. The top picture was from our first Christmas village that we had in the expos back in November of 2019. We are really glad that they're coming back this year. I think everybody's thrilled that Christmas Village is back. The bottom picture on that slide shows our very, very first event that we held in August of 2019 in the new expo facility, and that was TriStar Boxing. And it just was it was an amazing night. It was a very successful event, and we're looking forward to a full schedule. We're also in the midst right now of constructing one of the final pieces of our expo project as we define it, and that is a maintenance and storage building. That was a little bit delayed because of coordinating it with the infrastructure piece, since there's a lot of interplay between the infrastructure in that area of the property as well as the pandemic. So that kind of had slowed things down a little bit, but that we do anticipate that building to be complete in the next 6 to 8 weeks. The infrastructure project, I have a picture for you just to give you an idea of the extent of what that work is. So this was work that started and runs concurrently with the stadium construction. It helps to support all campus activities, but definitely brings in a lot of the high capacity utilities that the stadium needs and mixed use will need. So as you see here, the top, and I'll kind of show it to you on my drawing, this road right here that runs straight along the north end of the Speedway and connects here to Craighead, that is Wedgwood. So we're gonna actually extend Wedgwood all the way as it enters into the property, all the way to Craighead. It is gonna be a beautiful 3-lane bridge with bike lanes and sidewalks, and it will intersect Craighead at a brand new signaled intersection. That'll be a fantastic brand new front door, essentially, for our expo buildings and for our property that we've never had. And the good thing is it somewhat avoids the traffic coming out of downtown on Nolensville and the railroad tracks as it crosses Nolensville right outside our property. The other exciting thing that I am really looking forward to is the Benton work. So Benton Avenue comes into the property off of Bransford right here. And it really just terminated into a big parking lot in the old facilities. Now that is going to be extended. It's going to be similar up here where the stadium is going to be located, similar to how Fifth Avenue, I think that is Representative John Lewis Way now. You know, it's kind of a coplanar street, so it almost looks like a pedestrian plaza, but also serves as a roadway. Imagine that kind of in this upper area here. As Benton continues through the property and curves around towards the Speedway, it connects down into this brand new Wedgwood Avenue that's coming through here. You've been out to the property, I'm sure you can appreciate this hill right here where the stadium is going. There was no accessible way for pedestrians to get from one level of the property up to the hill, as we affectionately called it, from either side. The only way to really do it is from this entrance here. By regrading Benton, it now becomes ADA accessible. It will be a 5% grade, and it will be accessible from all sides of the campus. We have ADA accessibility from down at Fair Park up to the stadium and those promenades, and now we will have ADA accessibility on the front side as well. So lots happening. It's probably one of the most impactful parts of the construction because we're bringing, turning off utilities, bringing new utilities in, road work. So for us operationally, it's been day-to-day of movement, of how people get in, park, access, while we're still doing events. But I will say, I'll give a big shout out to the team and to Bell Construction, who has done just a fantastic job working with us to keep us in business during this really intense time with construction.
Yes. Quick question on infrastructure. So when we did all the various pieces that were somewhat inextricably related to each other, stadium, infrastructure, all that stuff, the kind of the bucket for infrastructure, as I recall, was, in my view, kind of insufficiently programmed, right? Like we didn't necessarily know exactly what it was going to be, and these sound like great projects. Worthy, glad, and I understand that was maybe somewhat in flux based on what was going to go where, so understandably. But for, this council's effort to make sure we're balancing, infrastructure required with development, infrastructure that the city supports through participation, and the cost of those things, and just the transparency around it, where is kind of the reporting, or who is maintaining everything that came out of that infrastructure spend? Like, so that bucket that we kind of created, who is managing that and kind of reporting back out that the Benton Avenue cost $3 million. The Wedgwood improvement is 5. You know, where can we find that?
So I can help facilitate getting that information to you. Technically, the stadium project and the infrastructure project are through money that is held by the Sports Authority. So even though we're working very closely with them, since it's our property and we have a vested interest on its success and how it functions, technically Sports Authority is holding on to that money.
I've been attending the Sports Authority meetings, and they're on YouTube. And there's always a very thorough report on those as well.
Yeah, we could probably just forward that presentation to you because they do, if it's anything like the detailed budget updates that we get on our projects that we're managing, it's extremely detailed by project as well as very thorough BAO, DBE and participation numbers.
And who project manages the infrastructure? Is that Metro? Is that Skanska? I mean, who's doing
That is, so we've, Sports Authority with Capital Project Solutions, CPS.
Thank you.
So stadium is next. This is the most updated, one of the most updated aerials that I have. They do a presentation to the Fair Board every month. So I pulled this from last week's Fair Board meeting. They're really moving along. They have got the cranes down, as you can see. They're working on roofing on the canopy and really diving into getting all the seats in and putting glass and doing a lot of the interior work. So the one thing that, is reported to the Fair Board every month is we're on time and we're on budget. So I think that makes really everyone very happy, on time, on budget, and we look forward to them opening up again mid-year 2022, yes. The mixed-use development, you may have been seeing a little bit of legislation come through on the mixed-use development. We're contemplating some rights-of-way that the Fair Board has approved as it relates to some of the infrastructure and access to mixed use from the public roadways that are going through the property, as well as some affordable housing funding and pilot. They are wrapping up a lot of their design. We anticipate them to do some site work, erosion control, borings, things like that to prepare the site. But we don't really expect them to start in earnest with construction on the first block, which is 8C. And in this picture, block 8C is this middle building here that sits between the Speedway and the stadium. We expect them to start construction on that piece shortly after the first of the year. The Speedway, a general update, obviously we're in discussions with Bristol Motor Speedway. It's a very complex issue, complex financing, complex proposal, and I know everyone is giving its extreme good faith and due diligence as we work through a lot of the details, but we're still working through, so there's no, I don't have too many details at this point, but the concept is to improve the Speedway. One of the things that is very important to everyone is the safety of the track. And what some other things that we look for in the investment in the track is sound mitigation, the track surface, the infield. There's a lot of opportunity and potential to redo how some of that is structured. Things that will help with mitigate some of our stormwater, our water infiltration issues, our stormwater management in and around the track, with improvements to the grandstand facility in the concourse. That's where the seating, the seating is for the fans. Modernize the utilities. I mean, our track was paved in 1958. The concourse and the grandstands were built in the early 70s. So it's time. It's time for an investment. And the goal, again, to continue to do local racing, the regional racing that we have done for many, many years, and then with the goal of bringing a NASCAR level races in. Community input and community impact have been ongoing topics at the Fair Board. Taking a lot of community meetings, we anticipate certainly a lot more public hearings. We have talked prior to this committee being restructured, having a joint meeting with, at the time it was the codes committee. We're happy to do that, if, when we get to the point where we want to present a formal proposal on the idea, I'm certainly willing to come back at that point and run through that with you. And then, of course, we have a lot of conversations underway about how fairgrounds operations and then schedule and coordination with all of our campus partners. And so I think everybody's very optimistic that we'll be able to work through those things. I will tell you that right now we're in the process of scheduling soccer games for 2022.
Wow.
And I know a lot of people put a lot of faith in a process. We're talking 3 years ago when we discussed soccer and how we were all going to live together. And I will say it's working out really, really well. Really, really cooperative. Everybody is being just really thoughtful about everyone's needs, and the scheduling is much easier than I thought going into it. So I want to give a lot of credit to the team and my team as well, of working through some of the details that we needed to help the team establish their schedule with the league. Yes.
So with the community input, and how do you integrate some of the concerns that the community has expressed?
So we have, through Bristol, we participated in probably, I don't even want to put a number on it, but we've identified probably 25 different groups, whether it be neighborhoods, businesses, schools that surround the fairgrounds, kept track of all of their concerns. And the Fair Board also has heard a lot of those concerns. We had a public hearing very, very early on in this process to identify some of those community concerns up front. You may remember or had read that the Stand Up Nashville had done some surveys in and around the fairgrounds. So that was what they found was consistent with some of the concerns that we had also heard at the Fair Board level. So we're taking those into consideration as we work through some of the operational details of the agreement. And that is still in negotiations, and we're still talking with Bristol on how to mitigate and work through operationally some of those issues. Things like sound mitigation at the differing levels, curfews, number of weekends, cars on the track.
What about the community benefits agreement that's going to help with workforce, as I know that there's quite a bit of that needed in the city?
Yeah, so they are aware of that desire for community benefits, and they are working separately with agencies outside of an agreement with the Fair Board.
So when is the contract with Bristol going to be signed? Is that still just in limbo right now?
Well, it's not in limbo. We're still pushing forward. We're working through details on financing and operational issues. So we're just still working on the proposal.
Okay, because I didn't know whether they were going to walk away or there was a deadline for the contractual signing or not.
No, we're still working through it, and we anticipate, again, more public hearings and with them and with you, so that you can hear the proposal and be able to answer, ask and get your questions answered as well.
Okay.
And last but not least, event updates. So as you can imagine, the pandemic was really tough on the event industry like us. We had been closed from mid-March of 2020, and we have just fully reopened this month. We were one of the first public venues, though, to have events during the pandemic, and that was our 2020 racing season, and we worked really, really closely with public health, and we learned a lot, and I thought we were really successful in putting on those outdoor events with all of the mandates and limitations that were in place at the time to protect the public. And I think our promoters did a great job, and it was kind of a light that there is a chance, an opportunity to get people together in a safe way. Our flea market, we reopened outdoors in May. We were still serving as the homeless shelter at that point, so we did not open indoor, but we did open to an outdoor only market in May, and we did that through last month. starting this Friday, is our first indoor-outdoor market since February of 2020. Corporate events are in full swing. We've had a full slate last month. We're seeing some impacts from COVID. I won't lie there. We've had, our flea market vendor count is down, for a variety of reasons. Some of our events that we call legacy events that have been with us for many years have lost their businesses. They lost their franchises because of, nobody was doing events. So we're gonna have to be in a really big rebuilding time at this point. And, we're up for the challenge, but we've got to rebuild and get people. There are still event promoters that are still canceling with us because they're just not ready. And they just don't have quite the numbers that they want to see at the events. The other big thing that we are planning is the divisional fair. As you know, the state fair relocated to Wilson County this past fall. We are required by charter to do a divisional fair at least 6 days. And so to that end, we have posted and hired a fair manager. That just happened this week, and we are full steam ahead planning for 2022 divisional fair.
Are there any more questions for Ms. Womack while she is here? Again, I thank you for coming and presenting this information for us.
You are welcome.
If there's another entity, department within our jurisdiction that you would like to hear from next month, shoot me an email and I will reach out to that department head and see if we can get them on our next agenda. So thank you again, Ms. Womack. If there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our very lengthy agenda. Resolution 2021-1166, O'Connell, Parker, Allen, Bradford, Hughes, Welsh, and Suara accepts a donation from the Congress Group in the amount of $2.5 million as a contribution to the Barnes Housing Trust Fund and approves a donation from the Congress Group in the amount of $500,000 to a to-be-formed nonprofit entity for the benefit of Wharf Park. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any second?
Second.
Okay. And discussion.
This to-be-formed nonprofit entity, who is it?
We had asked for this to come back.
I'll turn this over to Mr. Jameson. He can give an update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilman Hager. Yes, this had been deferred previously. I think an excellent question from Kathleen Henderson regarding that very issue. What is the propriety of accepting an allocation to go through a to-be-formed nonprofit entity? You may remember, Councilman Hager will remember, for about a year and a half, the council enjoyed the opportunity where if we had a large-scale development and they were seeking an upzone, we could negotiate with them, and in exchange for a certain percentage of units being affordable to workforce, they were granted the upzone. We then got preempted. That bill, 2016-133, died. What has happened since then is we take every opportunity we can get for affordable housing, and sometimes we encounter developers who are just willing to make a donation. And that is what has happened here. Here, the Congress Group is developing the fairly large development at 2nd and Peabody, and they have agreed to make a donation to the Barnes Fund and also to Wharf Park on the adjacent property. The donation to the Barnes Fund, that's an existing entity, so that makes sense, but Wharf Park is not in existence quite yet, and so there's not a Friends of Wharf Park organization yet. It'll take some time for that to be formed and then for the Friends of group to be formed. Metro Legal's advice in these scenarios is, A, when somebody wants to give you money, take it. B, make it as simple as possible so that we're sending a message out to the community that it won't be a pain in the neck if you want to make contributions. And C, get it memorialized as soon as possible because the developer can run into any other complications or priorities and suddenly change their minds. So we're doing that quickly. It's perfectly legal. As soon as we have the nonprofit Friends of Wharf Park formed, or whatever it's called, that does have to go through park regulations. So the Parks Board will have full control over the formation of that.
Right.
Once done, you'll see the letter that's attached to the resolution. The developer is committed to making 3 installments of the full amount of money, the $3 million total, once they're up and running. And so in order to memorialize this as soon as possible. That's what the resolution does.
And who owes the $500,000? Is it going to general fund or a parks fund or what?
So when it usually goes through the Friends of, it is controlled under the Parks Board, but it's through the Friends of for application to that particular park, just like Friends of Warner, Friends of Shelby, it's allocated to that particular park.
Okay, so we just hold it in an account somewhere? Once we take the donation, we just hold it in some account somewhere, or what?
Right, there'd typically be a separate business unit for that particular Friends of, but it's under the Parks Department.
All right, Chair, Vice Chair, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Is there a reason why it just wouldn't go to the Parks Foundation and be dog-eared for specific use?
That's a great question, and Councilor Henderson also had a premonition on that question. In this particular instance, the specific developer, the Congress group, asked to give to a Friends of group, and we want to accommodate that. We just don't have that group in existence yet, so they're willing to wait.
So could they have also used the community foundation as a go-to?
Sure. I guess the issue here is if somebody's willing to give you $3 million, if we come across as looking at gift horse in the mouth, they may not do that. And so we're trying to be as accommodating as possible.
I think, if I may, I think that the weird thing is that a Friends of group is created by Friends of a thing, and it doesn't exist. So the idea that a Friends of group would be created, it sounds kind of like maybe like an HOA. It's like we're going to form an HOA, but we're going to have all the votes on the HOA until we, is the people building the park is still going to be the parks. It'll be under Tim's view to design the park, build the park. I mean, it's like we've had some situations in my district where you have, like, the Memorial Foundation donates money to the Civic Design Center to get things ready, that kind of deal. So for them to designate that it must go to a Friends of group seems kind of. Is there a reason for that?
Well, and just to make no mistake, and I'm sorry if I've suggested otherwise, they are having no involvement whatsoever in its creation. This is not the Congress group then creating the group to give
That's what
money
I want.
to.
Okay.
They're stepping back, letting Metro and the Parks Board form the Friends of, as they normally would once they have a park that's up and running. We just don't have a park that's up and running.
Does the park board create a Friends of group? That doesn't how it works.
I guess what if I may, Chair,
Yeah.
I apologize. I think we absolutely are grateful and don't want to appear not to want this funding, but I think what you're hearing from the committee is wanting to understand whether it's, the Nashville Park Foundation in a general sense, right? Like, as I had understood it, and I know that's been somewhat in flux, there are parks that won't ever have a Friends group, or might, or to varying degrees, or they're small parks,
There's
they're
a lot of
pocket
parks.
So, I mean, I think, what I'm trying to figure out and strike the balance, and Mike, I don't know if that's just kind of by way of letter subsequent to passage, just sort of outlining, but I think if it's kind of a cart and horse thing, right? Because you want a Friends group to be very genuinely grassroots, people that care about a park. Like, it can't just be created in some vacuum somewhere and it's an entity, because it will fail. Like, you have to have a cohort of people that are invested in the park, that are going to show up and volunteer and manage the money. Like, it's no small thing. And I think we've got a bit of a, very intense Friends groups that have, huge boards and a lot of stuff, and they manage it. They're great partners. And then we have, all along the spectrum of engagement. So I think, it sends somewhat of an awkward message when we're appropriating, though grateful, from this entity, this much money, when just generally perceptually, right? Like, so it's like, I don't want to say no to this, but I guess what I'm asking is whether the Parks Department or the administration will just think about going forward, if we anticipate these sort of relationships with developers, do we have a process and a system? Where is the BU? What do we do? How can people be sure that it's going to be put appropriately and fully to that park? This park is going to need a lot of things, maybe long before there's a really viable Friends group. And right? I just think there's a lot of ambiguity there that, you know, if it's just gonna sit there, yeah, I mean, I don't want to decline it, but I just want to express that I continue to have some concerns
It might
about
be
it.
needed for
We delighted.
And I have similar concerns because it feels exclusive to me. It feels like Metro is engaging in private activity. And if it's not offered to those smaller parks and other entities such as this that cannot have that same type of generosity, it just seems like it just has some kind of exclusive feeling to it that Metro is a cohort to. It seems a little, I'm like you, I'm ambiguous about it. Don't want to say no, but it just doesn't feel
Yeah,
quite right.
Well, is there a way we can come back, like, bring it back up to the committee in 4 or 5 months to see what's going on?
I mean, you don't, like, I'm sorry, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hear what Mr. Jameson is saying, and that you don't, people are trying to give you money and you want to be able to take it. I wish that they had done the Barnes Fund, done that, and then worked with the Parks Board on the proper way to donate another $500,000, either to the Parks Foundation or to some sort of benefit for design and construction, as opposed to waiting for this, because you don't have a Friends group until it's designed, constructed, and people around it want to love on it. That, and I don't know where that money sits for that long, when Parks may need it to build the thing. So I don't know if there's a way that this committee can make a suggestion that the two items be separated, so that we can approve the housing, the Barnes donation.
And it seems like the Nashville Parks Foundation was supposed to fill that
Yeah,
middle
that's-
place,
yeah.
right? Where you knew that there was oversight and that there was a board, but they would still go through the Parks Board to say, should we whatever. So I apologize, Councilman.
Is there any possible way, kind of along the lines of Vice Chair Van Rees and Councilmember Henderson, to come back in 2 weeks with a substitute resolution that basically splits these apart, have a brand new resolution that's just for the Barnes Fund, and then a separate resolution with the $500,000 to Metro Parks?
Wants to chime in on that. Our concern again is that the Friends of was the specific request of our benefactor. And I'm also very definitely concerned that a developer who is about to begin construction on a large development, as many times as I often hit unanticipated costs, suddenly this can evaporate. We are absolutely delighted to come back with a letter that specifies what BU number we developed, what the Parks Board, and the Parks Department was consulted on this. This is not just a one-off. But more than happy to come back and report at a specified date. But I would just implore the committee, can we please memorialize acceptance of the money before things change?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Councilmember O'Connell.
Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I don't know how closely any of you have followed the Congress Group's project proposal at this site of Second Peabody, but it was, on the one hand, fairly contentious. There is one fairly large residential community nearby, City Lights, which was actually, I was there for the groundbreaking very early last term. It's a 7-story, kind of mid-rise residential community. I imagine many of their residents would actually be delighted to participate in a Friends of group. Congress Group worked closely with them. There were some concerns about the height. At the same time, Congress Group also had their original proposal effectively shredded by the Planning Commission because they did not bring exceptional design. Now they have brought that, not only have they brought that in collaboration with the city, they have brought more generosity than I usually see on a voluntary basis. And to Mr. Jameson's point, I think being able to accept gifts of this kind is like the community foundation in many cases. The donor preference is one of the things you take into account when receiving the money. If we want to receive money like this on a voluntary basis from a developer for an area somewhat nearby to their project that will serve multiple residential communities that are adjacent as well, including Rutledge Hill and the intact historic community there, I would encourage this committee to follow Mr. Jameson's recommendation, which has been vetted by Parks, and take receipt of the money. I'm all for looking at a vehicle or a strategy going forward for this, because I hope we do this more often. I don't want to rock the boat on the first one and say, you know what, we are going to micromanage our way out of not getting this money or losing the opportunity in construction costs. So that is my recommendation.
Thank you. Councilman
Thank you, Chair. Councilman O'Connell, I appreciate that. I share the concerns about the cart before the horse, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
if the district council member is engaged in supporting this, and especially is engaged in the residents of the district to support the park and is engaged with the formation of the Friends Group, I'd be okay with it, but it is cart before the horse.
I agree.
And just to speak to Council Lady Hurt's concern, I think the fact that you're getting $500,000 for a specific park was because that specific park is right next door adjacent to this new construction. And likewise, that's money that'll go to that park that would have to come from some other source if it wasn't for this $500,000. So I don't think it excludes money going elsewhere, because you got, I'm sure some of that money will be moved to, I'll give you some in my district too.
Yeah, so, because I got $150,000 given to Metro Historic for something that was part of the resolution, so.
All right, so can we get based on the information we've had, the feedback we've got from the Metro Council member, I would like to ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, right before you vote, I think maybe one thing I would recommend to this committee is, let's come up with a strategy for this going forward. I'd just say, like, as we're dealing with this first one, it's prompted a lot of really important and relevant questions. Let's take those, shape them into something, but also allow this one to proceed.
Definitely agree with that, and I'll be following up with Mr. Jameson about seeing what we can do, and then maybe have a special meeting of our group to kind of work through and what we want to see going forward. Real quick.
So just thinking about the community foundation as being the go-through as opposed to the bonds, I know that Bellevue, the Harvard Park, utilizes the community foundation for donations such as this in order to support it. So I'm just wondering if, it could be.
Well, we could come up with a list of recommended foundations, whether it's Parks Foundation, Memorial Foundation, Community Foundation, Historic
Or just
Foundation.
create a Friends of Metro Parks, period.
Right, and that's what the National Parks
Is, yeah.
Foundation
There
is
you go.
supposed to be.
All right, so motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
I'm abstain.
Okay. All right, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any against? And I've got you marked as abstain. All right. BL 2021-959, Hurt and Nash, named County Clerk's Office lobby at the Howard Office Building in honor of Mike Taylor, Chief Deputy Clerk of the Davidson County Clerk's Office. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So basically, it's as this says, and I think Mike Taylor now is probably the longest, or he was at the time of his retirement, the longest serving employee of Metro. Charlie Caldwell had been, and Mike Taylor was not far behind him. And he's retired. His wife got very ill, and he needed to be home with her, and the county clerk's office just wanted to recognize him in some way, and this was the way of doing so.
Sounds good. Motion to approve then.
We had it.
Okay.
Can I just ask just a quick question as to kind of general stuff? I appreciate the county clerk office has advanced this gentleman. We appreciate him for his long service to Metro. I did want to kind of interior to buildings, like, oh, well, this lobby and this, that, and then, and sometimes people have a great idea, but then you realize, oh my goodness, we forgot this other wonderful woman who worked for us for 30 years. I mean, is somebody kind of at the facility standpoint kind of keeping track of all those namings of interior spaces and Metro buildings just to make
General
I
sure?
was
services.
gonna say, I think general services.
Yeah.
So I don't know if keeping track is the right word, but we certainly do. When an opportunity like this comes up, we do take design in consideration and make sure that the space is significant, is duly signed. And then if a request comes in that contradicts that or makes it too complicated, we would voice our opinion at that point. But
Okay, so it's just sort of as advanced by department, we don't have any sort of, I mean, again, you have to be flexible, but, I mean, I assume, you've worked at Metro 30 plus, you can't just like have a department say, oh, this was a lovely woman that worked for us for 10 years and we want to name this hallway after her. Like, there's a process, right? Or,
Yeah, I think he's like 47 years.
oh, I'm sure, I mean, it's wonderful.
Yeah,
I think it's a good
there's a
thing.
naming committee from general services.
Right, like Parks has a naming committee and has certain kind of things, and when we do streets, right, there's certain rules. I just wondered, internal to our general services buildings, if we have some sort of process, or it's just sort of organic.
Whenever an ordinance comes through, we act on it. So Charlie Cardwell Garden, for example, just outside of the building, that was a recent.
Thank you, and I was wondering, I was like, did we honor Mr. Cardwell and similarly? Okay, okay.
I was gonna say, this is basically governed by a Metro Code provision, so it's basically all it says is that an ordinance has to be adopted to rename a building or structure.
There's a broom closet at East Precinct.
Right, yeah.
Named after you.
I'm thinking this room should be named after Angie Henderson.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate the clarification. We know we've been talking too long.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Was that a no?
I'll have to